Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
And, of course, thank you guys for joining us. As always, lots of boxing chatter. It's just been a great year for boxing so far. The summer of PBC continues. And on this week's episode, we're going to have legendary trainer Freddie Roach joining us, as well as 140-pound contender Darwin Price. Of course, we're going to take a look back at last week's undisputed battle between Charlo and Brian Castano. Lots to unpack with regard to that. And also, in today's toe-to-toe section, we are going to take a look at the top 5 greatest performances by a boxer aged 40 and over. But first, we got some heavyweight news. It's official. Following the disappointment of the Fury-Wilder 3 postponement, unified world heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua, AJ, will take on Alexander Usyk on September 25th in London. Mike, what are your thoughts on this bout?
Well, I was glad to hear a deal's been reached. Maybe the winner of that fight faces the winner of Fury-Wilder, and we get our undisputed heavyweight champion after all. Now, who wins the fight? I'm gonna pick Joshua because he's a good all-around fighter and he has significant physical advantages over Usyk. Obviously, Usyk could be outweighed by 20, 25 pounds, something like that. That said, I think people are sleeping on Usyk. I think he's a better fighter than Joshua pound for pound. He's clever enough to give the big man problems and maybe even survive the 12 rounds. If he does, the fight could be close on the cards. I'm going to predict that Joshua catches him and stops him late in the fight. I just think he's too big and too strong, but I won't be shocked if Usyk actually finds a way to win this fight.
I would be flabbergasted. And I think Alexander Usyk is an all-time great at cruiserweight, but at heavyweight, he has looked to be nothing more than a fringe contender. You look at the performance versus Chaz Witherspoon and the performance versus, who was the last person that he fought, Mike? Derek Chisora. Yeah, I was very disappointed in his performance there. Now, look, Evander Holyfield didn't look he looked significantly better than Usyk did, but he didn't look too hot in his first couple fights at heavyweight either. So it could be that Usyk is still getting accustomed to the weight, and we're going to have a 100% best heavyweight possible Usyk in the ring on September 25th. However, Anthony Joshua is a student of the game. He's a gym rat, and he's also in his prime and always improving. Not to mention he has so many natural attributes over Usyk, like you mentioned, his size, his strength, his power. I just think it's far too much. And, man, I think Joshua knocks him out early, Mike.
Well, I'd be surprised if that happened, but listen, Joshua's got massive punching power. It could happen at any time. But I just think that Usyk's a really clever boxer. It seems to me, I recall reading or hearing that he's bulked up a little bit too. He might be a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Listen, it's an uphill battle against Joshua. This is a tough assignment for Usyk. I think of guys like David Haye and Holyfield obviously became a great heavyweight. Thomas Adamek, guys who are really good at light heavyweight, cruiserweight, and they had problems at heavyweight because of their size. Could be the same situation, but I just think he's so good that you just never know.
Yeah, that's true, and we'll see. We'll see. I mean, definitely an intriguing fight, and I think one that we'll be discussing more in the coming weeks. But let us move on with this episode. He is a 140-pound contender looking to get back on track and make his mark in 2021. He's got a lot to say, and they say the price is right, and he would certainly agree. Darwin Price. Darwin, first things first, you were at last weekend's undisputed bout between Charlo and Brian Castano. What were your thoughts on the bout?
It was an excellent fight. Two warriors in the ring. I wasn't mad with the draw. You know what I mean? It could have went either way. Charlo picked it up the last couple of rounds, and Brian Castano was really tough, a tough opponent, man. And Mel had a hell of a chin, man. But I said both fighters put up a good fight, and I wasn't upset with the draw. I was okay with the draw. Could have went either way.
Yeah, it was a great fight. There's talk of a rematch, and assuming there is a rematch, how do you see that playing out?
A rematch. I think Jamil Charlo will knock him out on a rematch.
Why?
Because, man, he gonna go in there with a different attitude, and I feel like he gonna bring a different fight now that he's gonna get some input of this fight. Because I feel like Jamil Charlo fought on the ropes the whole time, and that's not his type of fight. He really fought Brian Castano's fight, and if Mel would have stayed in the middle with his jab that he has, I think he would have been better off.
Darwin, you were supposed to face Richardson Hitchens on July 3rd. Hitchens pulled out with an injury. Do you know what the exact injury was in his case?
They say it was a hand injury, but who knows, man. 5 days before the fight, that's supposed to be the week that you're supposed to be kind of taking it easy and getting ready and getting prepared for the fight. So I don't know how he sustained a hand injury, but who knows? But I mean, I'm trying to get that fight back on the books, but if we don't, then oh well. But honestly, I feel like I'm on another level from him. I'm 17-1. I got the one loss because of the injury, but I feel like I belong in the big leagues. I'm trying to go for the bigger names. I don't want to keep fighting guys who coming up and being like the B-side opponent or the step-up guy because I'm a Class A fighter. I know that for a fact, and I know that I have the tools that it takes to be with the big guys.
I like the confidence, but what would you say the chances are that you'll end up fighting Hitchens before you move up?
Who knows, man? I mean, I could talk to my management, Al Heyman and them, and Brad, and then we'll see what's next. Hopefully we can get that fight back on the books. But if not, then we have to keep on moving forward and try to go after some other names.
It sounds like, you sound kind of skeptical regarding what happened with Hitchens. So let me ask you, what would be the reason for him wanting to pull out of the fight then?
Man, I think he was nervous, man. I mean, I got a little buzz in the boxing world. Everybody that knows me in the boxing world knows that I'm not no pushover and know that I come to fight every time. They know that I'm ready to fight every time, any given moment. I'm always in shape. It was gonna be a fight for him, man. It was gonna be. I was gonna give him his first loss, definitely. I honestly feel that way. I honestly feel like I could stop him.
Yeah, a lot of people were looking forward to that fight, and you alluded to this earlier about being the B side against up and coming fighters. You're 17-1. Your only loss was in December 2019, and that was when you injured your knee, I believe, against Malik Hawkins. I was at that fight. A lot of people thought you were outboxing him until that point. Is that kind of how you saw it?
Yeah, I definitely was outboxing him, man. My knee was messed up before I jumped in there, and I didn't expect it to tear though. But I feel like I was winning a fight, and I fought a good enough fight to win the fight, but I actually feel like it should have been a no contest, to be honest with you. But I didn't really fight it like that, you know what I'm saying? And I think it was after a certain round, so they didn't count it as no contest. But I felt like they could have counted that as no contest so we can make that fight happen again. But, it is what it is, man. I'm moving forward from that. I lost. I take my loss like a man, and I'm just ready to keep moving up in that ladder. And I'm tired of, fighting people who's not an opportunity for me. You know what I mean? I'm trying to get the big names. I deserve to fight the big names. I've been fighting for a little minute, and I'm ready to prove myself.
Yeah, we definitely want to touch on that, in a bit in terms of who you could potentially face. But getting back to that particular fight, I mean, what was it like knowing that you're doing your thing in the ring only to lose because of something beyond your control?
It was devastating, man. It was devastating. But it's sports, man. Stuff happens. Things happen. Look at the Conor McGregor fight; he broke his leg. I mean, things happen, man. So it's just part of the sport and part of being an athlete. You put your body through all this intense training, and you just never know what to expect sometimes.
You mentioned the tear. What was the injury exactly, and how long did it take for it to heal 100%?
It was a patella tendon tear, and it took almost 8 to 12 months. Maybe a little bit over a year, to be honest with you. So
you didn't fight again until last April when you knocked out Saul Corral. Did you take some time to reflect on the sport and what you want to do during that time?
Yeah, man. It was depressing for me, man, because I didn't know where I was gonna end up. I didn't know how soon I was gonna heal up. I didn't know, what was next for me, man. Because the way I made money was boxing. And that was the way I ate, but I had a side job as well, and I still work, and I was still work and train. I've been working and training my whole career, so I'm just ready to get to a point to where I can make a living off of boxing, man, and I can get the income that I want, so I can make the investments and the right moves, and become a successful businessman on the outside of the ring as well.
What sort of work do you do?
I sell software, like EMR software, electronic medical records,
Well,
to health practices and stuff.
Darwin, I know you fight out of Houston, but you're originally from St. Louis. How did you first get involved in boxing?
Growing up in the hood, man. I grew up in a, kind of lower class area. And, when you grow up in the hood, man, you're going to have to fight at some point in your life. No matter what point, but you're going to have to fight somebody at some point in your life. But I grew up with these guys. One of my guys named LaMarcus Cowan, he used to box. And me and him used to walk around the neighborhood, and I saw this old guy cleaning out his garage. And I helped him clean out his garage. He gave me like these 2 pair of boxing gloves. And I kept the boxing gloves with me. He gave me the 2 pair of boxing gloves, helping him clean out the garage. And I always kept the boxing gloves with me in high school and stuff, and was just going around boxing guys in the gloves, but I never boxed. But I was like beating dudes up and like dropping dudes and stuff. And I was like, dang, I need to box. Until one day I ran into my boy LaMarcus Cowan and I got in the gloves with him. And he used to always beat me. And I'm like, dang, I used to always go back to try to beat him, but I couldn't. And he ended up telling me that he boxed. So I went to the gym with him, and he ended up getting me involved in boxing. But, he's matter of fact, we still keep in touch to this day, but he got, like 2 years ago, he's been incarcerated for murder.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a thin line, right?
Man. Thin line, man. I took a different route. He took another route.
Right. Now, a lot of people don't know this about you, but you were originally a track star at Grambling State, right?
Yes, sir. I had a full ride scholarship to Grambling State University. I ran the 800, the mile, and I ran the 1500, the 4x4 sometimes. And I also won state, in high school, in the 800 mile and 2 mile, first African American in the history of Missouri to ever do so.
Oh.
So I'm a track guy, Darwin. I have to ask you, what sort of times in the 800 and the mile and 1500?
My best time in the 800 was 148.4. It wasn't, that good.
That's good.
My mile time, my fastest mile time was 4:08 outdoor and 4:12 indoor. I ran a 4:12 mile indoor, which is equivalent to a 4:08 outdoor. My 1500 best time was like a 3:47. I won Texas Relays in 2010 in the 1500 meter relays. But those were my times. I ran 2 miles in high school. I ran 9:14, 9:13 in the 2 mile as a high schooler, like my senior year.
Wow, that's impressive. I know my track. Those are good times. You were good.
Yeah, man. But it's track is not a whole lot of. It's not a big reward, man. You got to put your body through so much, even in boxing. But the longer you invest, the bigger the reward is. As long as you keep winning in boxing. But you can invest and keep winning in track, but it's not a big reward. At the end. And it's like, you got to, imagine trying to break the 4-minute mile, man. It's real. It takes a lot to break that 4-minute mile, man. It's pretty tough.
Absolutely. Does a track background help you in boxing?
Yeah, definitely, man. It definitely helped me, man, like with the stamina and being able to just stay in shape and being able to, go run, because that's some of the fighters' biggest problem is not being able to not wanting to go run and not wanting to do cardio. They hate the cardio, So, so I love the cardio. It's a way of, it's like a therapy for me. You know what I mean? I like to go run. I like to listen to my music because it helps, kind of lower my stress and stuff.
Now, you're based in Houston now. Do you do any work with the Charlos at all?
Actually, right now I'm training at Jermell Charlo's gym at the moment.
Wow.
That's where I'm training at. Yeah, so we used to hang out a lot, man. Back when I first moved to Houston, me and Jamal Charlo would hang out quite a lot. But there's some good guys, man. But I'm training at Jermell Charlo gym right now, just for the time being, because it's so close to me.
That's awesome. What can you tell us about the Charlos that perhaps people don't know?
A lot of people, man, don't know that. Like Jamal Charlo, man, he is very creative, man. Like, he really a creative guy. Like, people I don't think a lot of people know that. Like, he real creative. They both cool. They both solid. And they real creative, man. They some creative guys, like, honestly. And I like the way, they market themselves in the boxing world. And people don't understand that background of, having to come up the hard way and nobody ever supporting you, nobody ever believing in you. I can understand that. You know what I'm saying? And they got a chip on their shoulder, man. You know what I'm saying? To always have been doubted. And, they got a chip on their shoulder, and I can't blame them for that.
Yeah, maybe that helps in boxing.
Yeah, it definitely helps, man. You got to have a chip on your shoulder, man, because you know what? I've been pretty humble in this sport, man, and I feel like a nice guy finished last, man. So, like, now I'm just ready to turn into the villain, man. Like, seriously. I'm ready to turn into the villain, man, and call out whoever.
It might be too late. You sound like a nice guy, Darwin.
I am a nice guy, but I can fight too, though.
That's true. That's true. So the 140-pound division is really hot right now. Is there anyone in particular that you're targeting?
Man, I'll fight Marios Barrios. I'll fight Josh Taylor. I'll fight Regis Prograis. Any of the top 5, top 10, Maurice Hooker, anybody like in the AB. I mean, whoever, Javante Davis. I know he's at 140. I mean, dude, I'm willing to go against. I'm willing to face whoever. Like, I'm willing to face either one of those people.
We just saw Rolando Romero say he wants to move up to 140. Is he someone that you consider fighting?
He's trash. I'll fight him too.
You don't see him as much of a challenge? Or?
No, man, dude, that was horrible, man. He got hit with some shit by a guy he wasn't even supposed to get hit by. And then, like, the thing about it is, I mean, yes, he has power and everything, but you can't hit what you can't see, man. And then, like, I mean, honestly, like, I just didn't see nothing spectacular with him, to be honest with you.
So would you advise him to stay at 135, or would you like to welcome him to 140?
Man, hey, I can definitely give him that welcome to 140, but I know one thing though, he better stay away from me. This ain't what he wants if you want to keep that O.
So when can we expect to see you back in the ring?
I just spoke with my team this week, and they said they're trying to get something back on the books ASAP since my fight fell out. So they're working on something for me, and I'm just staying put and trying to stay in shape till then.
Sweet.
Great. Darwin, thanks so much for taking the time. We hope to have you back.
Yeah, I really appreciate y'all for y'all time as well, man. Thank y'all so much.
All right, it's time for the week in review, and we all saw what went down last Saturday at the AT&T Center in San Antonio, live on PBC on Showtime. The undisputed 154-pound bout between unified world champion Jermell Charlo against WBO counterpart Brian Castano, a battle for the ages, an epic back and forth, just really tense, high-level action between the two that culminated in a split decision draw. Before we get to the decision, which everyone and their mother has an opinion about, Mike, let's talk about the fight itself. What was your take?
Well, I enjoyed it. It wasn't exactly what I expected. A lot of big fights, often aren't. But it was compelling throughout. I thought Castano would be busier than he was, and I thought that if Charlo caught Castano with a big shot or shots, that he'd be able to finish him off. Neither of those things happened, which led to the draw.
Yeah, for certain. I mean, I was okay with the with the verdict, but we'll touch on that in a second. As far as the fight, I mean, it doesn't get much better. Two elite operators with so much on the line, so much respect for one another, and both showed their strengths and their weaknesses. Let's talk about the verdict, though. What did you think?
I thought the draw was fine. I scored it 115-113 for Castano, who I thought did the best work when they fought inside, aside from the 10th round, which obviously Charlo dominated. I think 15-13 either way or the draw was the right range for this fight. The problem is that set 117-111 scorecard, 9 rounds to 3 for Charlo. That was a little bit out of bounds, I thought, a little bit of an insult to Castano, in my opinion. But the bottom line is I'm okay with the draw, which is the most important thing. Although it was disappointing because we were expecting to crown an undisputed champ, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, and to me, that was the most disappointing thing. The second most disappointing thing was the 117-111 card, which Jermell Charlo was like, that's a bit too much, is what he said in the post-fight interview, and he believes he won the fight. I think 117-111 either way is absurd.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you need to assess how you look at fights if that's how you're scoring it, because that was a close fight between two top guys. That said, I don't think that should be the story of the fight because it was such a great fight. The draw's
okay.
Right, the draw's okay. It's like we're we made it to our destination, but we're spending the weekend talking about the turbulence. Instead of enjoying where we're at. And look, I would have liked to have had a decisive winner. What surprised you, if anything, about this fight?
Well, the two things I mentioned, I really thought Castano would throw more punches, although I understand completely why he didn't after watching the fight. He had to apply intelligent pressure or he just wouldn't have survived the fight. He barely did as it was.
Yeah.
Charlo's just too powerful of a puncher. And I really didn't think Castano would. I really didn't think he'd make it out of the 10th round. He took some monster shots. He obviously was in tremendous shape and has a good chin. So those were the things that surprised me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that I guess I wasn't too surprised by anything that happened in the fight, but perhaps Charlo lingering on the ropes as much as he did. But I think that speaks to the skill that Castano has. What could Charlo have done to win decisively?
Well, I said before the fight, and Charlo himself alluded to it afterward. He needs to be busier early on. This is what I said early on, that could come back to bite him if he wasn't busy early in the fight. I think a lot of big punchers rely too much on their power. And if they can't score a knockout, they sometimes end up behind on the cards and they end up in trouble. That's where Charlo was, after 9 rounds. He had to win the last 3 rounds to earn the draw. Right. He would just need to let his hands go more than he did in the rematch. There's no reason not to, unless conditioning is a problem, which I presume it isn't. I would like to see Charlo at least keep pace or close to keeping pace with the opponents while he's looking to hurt them. Otherwise, it's going to come back to bite him again. And finally, I thought Darwin Price brought up a good point, and you actually just alluded to it too. Don't back into the ropes against Castano. Jab and move, and the chances to land a big punches are going to come.
Yeah, and it's funny. That's what Charles trainer Derek James was trying to tell him. Like, why are you on the ropes against this guy? But again, maybe because Brian Castano's a really good fighter and knows what he's doing in there. Yeah. And I think that Charlo might not have thrown so many punches because Castano made him a little bit wary. Heck, Castano usually throws a lot more punches, and he seemed to be wary as well. Facing the kind of firepower he was against Charlo. What could Castano have done differently to win decisively?
The same thing. I thought he did again. I thought he did enough to eke out a decision, but he didn't throw enough punches to take control of the fight by any means. Again, I'm not sure he can throw many more punches and survive against Charlo, but he might have to if he wants to win a decision or win decisively. Charlo's counters were just brutal at times. Yeah. I mean, those are just big punches. Castano's one thing that stood out is Castano's a really good defensive fighter. I mean, a lot of Charlo's punches I thought hit his gloves. I thought he's really good at parrying punches, and obviously he's durable. To survive what he survived was amazing. He could probably be a little bit busier and survive, but I'm not 100% sure. But listen, he's got to throw more punches to beat Charlo.
Yeah, he certainly does, and I think he sort of faded there in the last 3 rounds, which you mentioned. That proved to be the difference. Right now, hot take, in your opinion, who wins an immediate rematch?
I would lean toward Charlo because I think he can pick up his work rate without taking too many risks. Although again, he'd have to be in prime condition, and I presume he would be. And he already proved he can hurt Castano. I don't know what else Castano can do to avoid taking at least some big shots. Charlo is just such a sharpshooter. I think Charlo might actually stop him in the rematch. But listen, I think Castano is a really, really good fighter, an elite guy, and anything's possible in that fight. He's going to make adjustments too. So I think, again, it would be a fantastic fight. I just see Charlo being a little bit busier and getting the job done the second time.
Yeah, I think that there is. It seems to be a clearer path to victory for Charlo based on what we saw on Saturday night. He did seem to be the heavier hitter. He did finish strong, and he has this clutch gene where he can just pull it out of the fire late. No matter what's happening. He showed it against Jackson. He showed it against Harrison. In the rematch against Trout, he scored those knockdowns, and then we saw it again here late where he just, when he needs to, he steps it up, and so I have to go with that guy, the guy who finished strong, the guy who made the other guy completely wary over the the last couple rounds of the fight. But I think for sure that the real winner would be the fans. So I hope that we see that fight next, and based on what these guys have said, I believe that will be the case. Now, the co-feature, Rolando Romero, the undefeated interim WBA 135-pound champion against Anthony Yiggett. Can you dig it? Yiggett weighed 5 pounds over the 135-pound limit, but Romero decided to go ahead with the fight and put a beat down on him, dropped him, 3 times en route to a 7th-round TKO. What were your thoughts on Rolly's performance?
I thought he looked formidable. He keeps saying that he has elite power, and he went out and proved it once again, much to Anthony Yiggett's chagrin. He knows how to land those bombs. If I have a criticism, it might be similar to Charlo. Romero might be a little too in love with his power. Maybe he's even a little bit one-dimensional, throwing one punch at a time. I think that was the problem he had against Jackson Marinez last year. He couldn't take him out, so things got a little dicey. And Romero's just throwing one punch at a time. He might want to throw more combinations. He might have been able to do more damage, get Yiggett out earlier had he done that. Listen, I have to say that I'm nitpicking a little bit, though. He just destroyed, he destroyed the guy in 6+ rounds. So he deserves credit for a good performance.
Yeah, he certainly does. And in a way, it's, I feel like he's kind of being slept on because, when you look at it, I look at the attributes that this guy possesses. Rolly, he's fearless in there. Looks like he has a good chin. He hits hard, and he's athletic. And those traits could make him, a problem versus anybody if he continues to hone his craft. What did you think of? How far away is he, in your opinion, from challenging a Tank Davis or the rest of the 135-pound elite? He also mentioned moving up to 140, so the 140-pound elite.
Right. I don't know about Davis right now. I'm not sure that Romero would have any advantages whatsoever over Davis, who's, no shame in that. He's one of the top, handful of fighters in the world pound for pound. I really like Romero's confidence. Who knows? Maybe he could match Davis's power. Sometimes you have to just go for it and see what happens. However, if I were advising him, I might suggest he continue to work on a few things. His boxing, his throwing combinations, and maybe target the creme de la creme in 1 or 2 or 3 fights.
Yeah, I just feel like the level that Davis is operating at right now is a few rungs above where Romero is, and he hasn't had that test that could properly prepare him for Davis. Now, look, I liked what he said after the fight, where he was like, well, Tank fought for his first world title in his 16th bout. I'm in my 14th. What's the big difference? So I like the confidence. But I think Gervonta Tank Davis is a special fighter, and it would be quite a leap to challenging someone who's not only facing opponents at that high level, but who's headlining in front of big crowds and know what it's like and knows what it takes, because all of that matters. So with that said, who would you like to see Rolly face next?
Well, he was supposed to fight Austin Delay last week, right? Maybe
right.
him. Maybe
right.
him. Maybe they can make that fight. Maybe Robert Easter, although that's a tough fight, I think, for Romero, which is fine. He sounds like he's up for these challenges. How about Batyr Akhmedov? And if he goes up to 140, maybe Mario Barrios, but that's a really dangerous fight to move up and fight a guy like that.
Sure is.
Darwin Price. We talked about Romero with Darwin, maybe him. These are all good fighters, obviously. They're just not the Gervonta Davises, the Teofimo Lopezes, or the Regis Prograis, guys at that level right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Austin Delay is still a really good fight for Romero, a nice step up, and that's what I would like to see. Now, speaking of step-ups, in the Showtime telecast opener, we saw Amilcar Vidal Jr. take on Emmanuel Lima in one of the best fights that we've seen this year. Great back and forth. Vidal won a majority decision after 10 rounds. Mike, what were your thoughts on the fight?
Good fight. It was more competitive than I expected. I don't know why, but it was. I just thought Alim looked terrific. He obviously has found a nice groove with Ronnie Shields in his corner. He boxed well. He was obviously he was confident. He was really tough. All that made life very difficult for a young fighter like Vidal, who had to dig deep to win this fight. It was a good, evenly matched fight. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it kept getting better, like round after round after round after round. What about the decision? It was booed by the crowd. What was your take?
I don't have a huge problem with Vidal winning a close decision. I guess the judges thought he landed the bigger, cleaner shots. That's my guess. I might have actually leaned a little bit the other way, but a close decision for Vidal is okay. Now, that said, I hate the 97-93 scores. That's 7 rounds to 3. That just didn't.
Noticing a pattern here.
Yeah, that just didn't happen. And again, it's disrespectful for a guy like for Aleem. You could tell he was just devastated when he heard that he lost that fight. I thought Aleem essentially fought Vidal on even terms, and he deserved better than 7 rounds to 3.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? Look, it was a close fight. I was fine with the decision, but if you ask me, like you, Mike, I kind of thought that Emmanuel Lee pulled it out. Certainly, it looked like he had all the advantages in there except for size and strength. And I think that's something for Vidal to take note of going forward. And certainly, it's also a fight where it's a learning experience. He can take that, back to the gym and look at where he needs to improve and do just that. Where does Aleem go from here?
I think Aleem learned how good he was in that fight. I hope he's not discouraged, because I think he can use that performance as a springboard to bigger and better things. He was that good. Yes, he lost the decision, but we saw what we saw. We saw a really strong performance from him. I hope the powers that be reward him for that and get him another important fight next time out.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, it's crazy to think that he had been out for almost 2 years and he came back and turned into that kind of performance. Yeah. I mean, he may look better the next time we see him, and I'd like to see him against, some more top fighters in the division, certainly some of the up and comers. Who would you like to see Vidal face next?
I think it became obvious in that fight, at least to me, that his handler should ease him into top-level opposition. He's another example of a guy who relies heavily on his power, and he seemed to me to be in trouble when he couldn't put Aleem away and was taking a lot of shots himself, although the 2 scorecards didn't reflect that in the end. I think he might want to continue his development before he thinks about facing like a top 5 guy.
Yeah.
Maybe not, for some reason, Hugo Centeno jumped into my head. Maybe a guy at that level.
That's a great option.
Yeah, kind of like a low top 10 guy or a guy at that level. But I wouldn't even rush that. There's no rush with him. I would. He obviously has more to learn, and one step at a time.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, I still think he's still of a bit of a little bit of a ways away, if that's the proper way to say it.
A work in progress, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, a work in progress. He's still young. What is he, only about 25 years old or so? And I think that I'd give him another year before I step him up. A couple more fights against this sort of opposition, and see where it's at, and see if we see improvement. And then let him step back in with some of the top guys in the division. But for now, I think this was a big learning experience for him. Now the middleweight division is sort of wide open. I mean, they need fighters there. So who knows? He may get a title shot sooner than we think, but I guess we will see what happens. Now it is time to bring in our next guest. I mean, what more can you say? One of the greatest trainers of all time. He's won every accolade you could think of, and you will see him in the corner of the great Manny Pacquiao Saturday, August 21st, when they take on Errol Spence Jr. in a welterweight world title match on Fox Sports pay-per-view, none other than Freddie Roach. So Freddie, here we go again. I mean, did you think you'd still be training Manny 20 years after the Ledwaba fight?
No, that was like unseeable. It's been a long time, and we've been together for a long time, and like 21 years, and wow. He's going for another title.
Yeah, another title of the many he's won in his career. I mean, how is what Manny's doing even possible? How can he still be this good into his 40s?
He takes care of his body. He works really hard every day. His work ethic is great. And he's still really strong, and he moves very well, and he's in a real fight. I was really happy that he picked a real opponent, and that's guy who's popular because he has a lot of dolls or something like that.
Right. Freddie, do you have any thoughts on why athletes in general are able to compete into their 40s more than they used to? I'm thinking not just of Manny, but also Tom Brady at the moment.
Yeah, athletes can go longer now. You don't now as a professional fighter, you don't fight nearly as much as you used to. I mean, I fought 11 times in 1 year at one point in my career, and boxing was a lot busier back then. Now, if you fight 2 to 3 fights per year as a fighter, you're pushing it. You're beating everybody else.
Right. Yeah.
And,
Good point.
that's why the longevity of the fighters is they can go much older and much higher number.
Right. So people have always talked about Manny's speed, Manny's power. Do you think his ring acumen is underappreciated? And is that one of the reasons he's been able to succeed this late in his career?
Yeah, I mean, he moves around the ring so well, and he's got good rhythm. And, he's really hard to judge when he's coming or going. I mean, he's in and out, and you don't know if he's coming or going and back in. And he's really hard to read. So his ring generalship is really, really high, and he still used it very well.
What differences at this age, what differences, if any, do you see in Manny in terms of his fighting or his training?
The training, the sparring partners are getting a little tougher, and we brought in 2 very good sparring partners, and they give Manny a little bit of a tough time, but it'll be just a matter of time before Manny gets acclimated to them, and then he'll be taking over soon.
Well, based on the clips we're seeing, I mean, Manny still seems really fast. How does his speed compare with earlier in his career?
It's still right there. I mean, his speed is really good. His footwork, his foot speed is very good. It always has been. And, his hand speed is tremendous. I work mitts with him, and he hits as hard as he ever did, and I don't see any difference in the speed at all.
Amazing. Manny's coming off that amazing victory over Keith Thurman to win the WBA title. How did he pull that off?
We had a good idea of starting quick in that fight. I said, man, you jump on this guy right away. And when we jumped on him right away and knocked him down, I think we took his heart right there. And we played a similar stance we were looking at this fight, because I think, our opponent this time is more flat-footed than the others, and I think he's easier to hit, but he's a little bit dangerous. If you stay in the pocket, he will hit you back.
Wow.
Right.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
So you sort of alluded to this. You sort of even answered it, but is Errol Spence a bigger challenge than Thurman, or no?
He's probably a better puncher, I think, and that gives him the higher edge in the fight. And he is a little bit dangerous again, but like Pacquiao, he's got to be in and out, and he can't stay in the pocket and trade with the guy too much. And he's going to be very selective of what he lands.
What do you see as Errol's strengths and weaknesses?
He's a little bit slow-footed. He doesn't move that well, and his punches aren't the quickest in the world, but they are very hard. And he's a good puncher. So he is a good puncher, yes, but he's a little bit slower than Manny. And I plan on Manny being in and out before he even gets started. So once Manny starts landing those combinations, and then he gets out of the pocket and he's in a safe place, and then we're right back in. So we're planning to fight a really high tech fight, and a lot of footwork and a lot of in and out, and a lot of speed, because he still has all those attributes.
Not a bad idea. Is there any particular performance from Errol where he impressed you? He
impressed me in his last fight a little bit, because coming off that car accident, I was surprised he's still alive, to be honest with you. And I wish him well. And the thing is, at the press conference, he was a gentleman. He's a very nice guy. Both guys are very cordial to each other. And what I like best about this is a real fight. This is 2 of the best fighters in the world going at it, and we just don't have that happening enough in boxing.
Yeah.
Is the 2.5-year layoff a concern at all, or at his age, is it a blessing almost to have that time to recharge?
I think he needed the time to recharge and get back at it. And I wonder sometimes still if he's recovered from it, because at that speed and that type of accident, I mean, again, he's very lucky to be alive. And again, he did look good in the first fight back. I mean, he didn't look great. He looked good. But again, he wasn't fighting Manny Pacquiao at that time.
Right. How about Manny's layoff? Is that a concern?
Manny's 2-year layoff. He sends me tapes of his workouts all the time, and I send back my thought on his tapes. And he's working hard all the time, playing basketball all the time. He's very athletic. I mean, the thing is, the kid, he loves sports, and in between being a senator and a father and all that, he plays basketball every day of his life.
Well, now, most fighters, I mean, no matter who they are, typically they don't finish their careers on a high note. Do you think about that with Manny, and do you worry about that at all?
I don't really worry about it, but the thing is, I mean, I know I retired on a bad note. I fought a fight and I didn't win, and I decided to myself that I just wasn't getting any better. But again, I was 27 years old, but I was an old man at 27, and I had 54 pro fights still. And again, back in my area, you fought a lot more often. But now, with the span being like 2 to 3 fights a year, they have a lot more downtime and recovery time.
Yeah. Now, with all that said, do you have a prediction? Something you want to lay on the line for the Spence fight?
Well, I see a good fight from Manny. Again, he's hard. He hits hard, but he's a little bit slow, and I think we're going to take advantage of his speed, his foot speed, and his hand speed. I honestly think Manny's going to dominate him, and I think he will knock him out.
Wow. Freddie, Manny's legacy couldn't get much better than it is now, honestly. But what does a victory over Spence do in terms of the way Manny is perceived, do you think?
Well, it's, it makes him bigger than ever, of course, and he's pretty big already and so forth. But, at 147, he's never had a clean knockout. And that's why I'm going in that direction a little bit, because I'm pushing Manny to punch hard and quick and get this guy out of there. Because if he hurts him, I want him to finish him.
Got it. How does Manny compare, in terms of his career with guys like Roberto Duran and Ray Leonard and those guys? Do you think he's in the same class?
I do think he's in the same class. He's won 8 world titles, and I don't think that record will ever be broken. I don't see anyone reaching that level. And there's some very, you talk about some very good fighters out there. But again, Manny's very good also. But one thing about Manny, he wins and loses the best way. I mean, because he's been knocked out before, and when he gets knocked out, he says, "Freddie, don't worry about it." He says, "Let's get another fight." He says, getting knocked out is part of this sport. That's part of our lives. And he handles knockouts better than most people.
Yeah, I love that. Let's assume that he gives a strong performance, win or lose. How much longer do you see him fighting? I mean, after all, as you mentioned, he's got so many other things going on in his life.
Yeah, it's funny because I always say that, when Manny becomes president, I think he's going to have to defend the title at least once as the president of the country. And, I really like that because, I mean, for a fighter to become president of a country and do a good job, and he's always trying to take care of the poor people, and I think it would be great for him. And it's just my thought though, and that's why I don't think this is the last one. I think as president, he's going to defend the title.
Wow. That would be something.
That would be something.
Piggyback. I'm sorry.
I'm
Go
a
ahead.
dual citizen, and I will vote for him.
And then trade him. Yeah. Um, piggybacking off of what Mike just said, of course, we don't know when it will end, but I have to think that when it does end, it will be sad, not just for us, the fans, but for you as his trainer and his friend, and given the close relationship you guys have. Have you ever? Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you given that any thought?
Yeah, of course I gave it thought because the end usually isn't a happy time, and the end is usually like when I ended it, I was 27 years old and I wasn't getting any better, and I said why am I getting my head kicked in and not making any money? So I retired at 27, and then Eddie Fudge gave me a job as his assistant trainer, and then I found a new love, and training fighters has been great for me, and even that's going to end at some point, I know, because I get older every day too.
Well, hopefully you can pass down that great legacy as well.
Hopefully, and I've had a lot of good fighters in my gym and so forth, and there's I get like 17 pro fighters right now, and I love coming to the gym every day. I really don't live in a house. I live in the gym. In the house, I just sleep at. So.
That's for the love. Switching gears for a second, we wanted to ask you about one of your other fighters, Elvis Rodriguez. I assume he's still with you. He's a free agent now. Do you know what his status is and when he might fight again?
Well, we're looking for a fight for him right now, and possibly on Tuesday of next week, he will be sparring with Manny Pacquiao.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Because he has the height and the reach, and he's a good boxer. He's somewhat like our opponent, maybe a little bit faster, but a little bit slow on his feet also. I think he would fit right in. So
I bet he's more. Sorry, go ahead.
Elvis is working out every day right now, getting ready for that.
I was going to say, I bet he's more excited about that than any upcoming fight.
Most people are. Yeah, getting in the ring with Manny Pacquiao, a lot of people look forward to it, but then a lot of people don't like it when they get in. He's hard to deal with. He really is.
That's easy to understand why. You also worked with Tyson Fury in his first fight with Deontay Wilder. We hear that he and his team have approached you about working with him again for the third fight. Is that happening?
I saw him in Vegas for a moment, and he asked me, he said, will you train me again? He just said, walking by, he said, will you train me again? I said, you know where my gym is? And he smiled, and I just smiled back and so forth. I don't think it was a real conversation. We just bypassing each other. And I haven't heard from him since, so obviously it's not going to happen. And, well, now maybe the fight won't happen, or I think he got postponed anyway. So, but he was when I did train him, he worked very hard, and he's a big, strong kid.
Why didn't he have you back for the second one? Just curious.
I think the only reason they had me in for the first one is because they plan to go to Big Bear and all that, and the Big Bear stuff fell apart on them, and I was only available gym down at sea level that would let them come for free. And that's something I do all the time, though, because fighters don't have to pay to come to my gym.
Now, getting back to Fury versus Wilder, if the third fight does happen, it's scheduled for October 9th. How do you see it playing out?
You've got two guys that both can punch, and they're both very heavy-handed. And I know if I had Tyson, I would have a good game plan that like we did in the first one, and they'd follow through with that. But the thing is, I'm not going to be part of it. So I do like them. I wish them both well because they've both been real nice to me outside the ring, and very respectful to towards my gym. So it was nice to have them both in here working out. Of course, at different times.
That's awesome. Freddie, last thing, you're still one of the busiest guys in boxing. I think I know the answer to this based on what you said, but are you enjoying it as much as you ever did?
Yeah, I enjoy coming to the gym. It's a lot of fun. This year has been kind of a rough year. They've closed me down a couple of times.
Yeah.
The thing is, I get tested every day right now before I go in the gym, and but I'm only allowed downstairs with the pros and not upstairs with the amateurs. The rules have all changed a little bit here and there, and so forth. But overall, I'm having a good time, and I just love being in the gym with the fighters. And I did have a bad surgery. I did tear my bicep and my shoulder, and the doctor did a great job on it. I catch punches with 6 fighters a day, 10 rounds each.
Wow.
And it came back really, really well. So I'm really happy about that.
Great.
Yeah, that is great to hear. And Freddie, of course, it's always great to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time out to speak to us. We wish you all the best on August 21st. We will be there, and we hope to have you back on afterward.
That sounds great. Thanks a lot. I'll have a good victory speech for you, okay?
Freddie, thanks.
Sounds good, Freddie.
Okay,
Take care. All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe-to-toe, and this week we are going to unveil our list of the top 5 greatest performances by a boxer aged 40 and over. As usual, we're going to go in ascending order. Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay, once again, I'll preface this by saying this was fun. This was a fun exercise. There were a lot of options. I mean, I considered
surprisingly more than I thought.
Yeah, I consider maybe 7 or 8 options and came up with these 5. So my first one might be a little bit obscure, but it's always stood out to me. Larry Holmes, unanimous decision over Ray Mercer in 1992. Holmes was 42 at the time, and he'd already lost back-to-back fights to Michael Spinks and was knocked out brutally by Mike Tyson a few years earlier. He beat some second-tier guys subsequently, but I don't think people gave him much of a shot against Mercer. Remember, he was the Olympic gold medalist. He was unbeaten, and he just destroyed Tommy Morrison. Well, Holmes just outclassed him in the end. He outboxed him to win a clear decision and put himself in position to fight for the title. And remember, he was competitive against a prime Evander Holyfield in that title fight, which came directly after the Mercer fight. Holmes was still a good fighter into his 40.
He certainly was, and that's why that's my number 5 as well. We didn't share lists, It's always amazing when this happens, and I think like, no way is Mike gonna have this number 5,
That's weird.
And then you started off, and that really was an impressive performance by Larry Holmes against a rising Ray Mercer who gave everybody hell. And look, I mean, what's interesting about that to me was what you mentioned, that Holmes was competitive against world champion Evander Holyfield in his next fight. And I remember, reading, I believe it was Ring Magazine or KO Magazine at that time, I'm not sure, but Holyfield obviously, a couple years later would go on to fight Mike Tyson. Tyson was a huge favorite, and they asked Holmes for his prediction, and he said Holyfield's going to take him into deep water and drown him. And he was 100% right. Just a great ring IQ, and it showed that night versus Ray Mercer. All right, let's go on to number 4. Now, my number 4 is fairly recent, super recent, and that is Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman, favorite coming in. I thought he was going to knock Pacquiao out, but the 42-year-old Manny pulled it off once again and won a beautiful decision over Thurman, and one of the best fights at welterweight in recent years. Dropped him in the first round, hurt him again in the 10th, and for the most part did lots of damage and showed his world-class chin and veteran craftsmanship in pulling off one of the finest performances of his career.
Okay, so I'm going to reiterate that we didn't talk before this.
Oh, jeez.
But my number 4 is Pacquiao Thurman.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've
Great
talked about
words.
Yeah, we talked about this fight many times. Pacquiao was 40. He looked good against Lucas Matisse, and he looked good against Adrian Broner leading up to the Thurman fight. But Thurman was a different level of challenge. He was an unbeaten champion, a big, strong welterweight. I know Thurman had been dealing with some nagging injuries, and he looked a little shaky against Josecito Lopez in his previous fight, but he was still Keith Thurman, still one of the best 147-pounders in the world. That's what made what Pacquiao did so special. He put Thurman down in the opening round to set the tone. He fought really well in bursts, which he does now. He withstood Thurman's performance in the middle rounds. He was really strong in the middle rounds, and then he did well down the stretch. That arguably was the greatest victory in Pacquiao's career.
Yeah, you could make a strong case for it. I mean, that's how good it was. And what can you say? Although, look, on August 21st, he might pull off one that's even bigger.
Yeah.
Who knows where that'll end up on this list if that were to happen. What's your number 3?
Okay, so now I'm guessing we're gonna go different paths.
This one we veer off. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm gonna go back in time here, but this fight's just an all-time classic. Archie Moore, 11th round knockout of Yvonne Durrell in 1958. Boxing historians absolutely love this fight for obvious reasons. Moore, who was either 42 or 45, depending on what you believe. There's always been a discrepancy about his age. He was either born in 1913 or 1916. I see both ways. And anyway, he was in his 40s. He went down 3 times in the first round and just seemed completely out of it against a really rugged Canadian fighter in defense of Moore's light heavyweight title. And he went down once more in round 5. He had been, just a real quick background, he'd been fighting at heavyweight in a series of fights before this one. Maybe his body just couldn't take the weight loss. He dropped 15, 20 pounds, however many it was. Then in a demonstration of just inhuman determination, he just turned things completely around. He put Durrell down 4 times and won the fight by an 11th round knockout. If you haven't seen that fight on YouTube, watch it. You won't be sorry. By the way, he stopped Durrell in the 3rd round the following year in a dominating performance.
Yeah, I for the purposes of this exercise, I watched highlights, and like you, I mean, it was such a brilliant battle that I'm going to discuss it a little later.
Geez, okay.
In our conversation. My number 3 is Kelly Pavlik versus Bernard Hopkins. I went back and forth here with Hopkins Tarver or Hopkins Pavlik. Now, Hopkins Tarver did not make my list because I actually picked Hopkins to win that fight. Whereas I did not see a path to victory for Hopkins against Pavlik. Hopkins was 43 at the time, Pavlik 26 years old. And this one wasn't even close. I mean, he completely outboxed Pavlik, won a wide unanimous decision on all 3 cards, easily the upset of the year, and one of the most impressive performances by a fighter age 40 and over.
Yeah, it's funny. I considered Hopkins Pavlik, and the reason that I didn't go with it is because you don't move up and wait and fight Bernard Hopkins. I don't care how old he is. Yeah. And that's what Pavlik did.
That's what Pavlik did. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's innately he's not as talented as Hopkins. But you're right, though. I mean, that was an eye opener. I was surprised that he won. I guess I wasn't that shocked that he won the fight. Maybe I was. I can't quite remember. But I remember thinking that. I guess I thought Pavlik would win. Pavlik was the hot fighter, so he moved up. But in retrospect, it's what I said. You don't move up and wait and fight Hopkins.
Yeah, and I think that was proven that night.
So my number 2 involves Bernard Hopkins, but I ended up going with Hopkins' unanimous decision over Jean Pascal in 2011. I could have gone with a number of Hopkins post-40 victories for the purposes of this exercise. Tarver, I considered. Pavlik, I considered. Tavoris Cloud, Beibut Shumanov. Honestly, any of these could have been the one, or we could maybe have just gone with them collectively. I went with the second Pascal fight because of the magnitude of the fight and Pascal's ability. Yeah. Remember, Hopkins was 46 years old. He was trying to supplant George Foreman as the oldest fighter to win a major championship. Also remember that Pascal defeated Marcus Brown and Badu Jack in 2 of his most recent fights, or his 2 most recent fights, after which he tested positive for steroids, but that's a different conversation. Still, at the time Hopkins fought him, he was a legit guy. The ring had him as their 175-pound champion. And although it was close competitive fight. The old man outboxed a solid guy 17 years his junior to win the WC belt. Archie Moore was still really, really good after 40, but Hopkins might have been better. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, was that the fight where Hopkins was doing the push-ups like in between rounds? I think that might have been. The second Pascal fight. That was just an incredible performance by Hopkins. And at that point, it was getting to be ridiculous. I think, like, geez, like, when is this guy finally going to slow down? To think he didn't slow down for like 3 more years, which is kind of wild, when you think about it. Now, my number 2 was Archie Moore versus Yvonne Durrell for all the reasons that you mentioned. Moore being either 42 or 45 and taking a lot of punishment, but also showing exquisite boxing skill, power, ring IQ. I mean, everything. What a career this guy had post 40. But I don't need to continue to wax poetic about it. We've already spoken on it. So let us move to number 1. I guess it's my turn to go first, and I suspect we'll have the same number 1 for this one, and that is none other than Big George Foreman against Michael Moorer. Foreman, 45 years old, a monster underdog against the undefeated heavyweight champion in Moorer. And what can you say? I went back and watched that fight a couple months ago because, I remember it being a complete blowout the last time I watched it. But this time it was a little more competitive than I thought. Yes, Moorer was winning the rounds, but Foreman was landing some good shots. There were some good back and forth, some good exchanges. He had a really strong jab that night, and he turned it on when he needed to. In the 10th round, landed that right hand, and it was good night, Irene. And we had the oldest heavyweight champion in history, and George Foreman had exorcised the demons from Kinshasa and completely not only resurrected his boxing career. I believe he did that when he fought Evander Holyfield actually a couple of years earlier and was competitive, but went from being a Hall of Famer, maybe near Hall of Famer, into an all-time great, Mike.
Yeah, it's amazing that he won this title almost exactly 20 years after losing it to Ali after a 10-year break. One of the great
and
stories.
wore the same trunks that he wore that.
Yeah, it's one of the great stories in boxing history. I think he was a Hall of Famer before that. He didn't even have to come back, and he probably would have been a Hall of Famer. But he became like something else, like a legend, big time legend. I know Foreman's performance essentially came down to one punch, but what a punch it was! That I was there. That was probably my single favorite moment of all my years covering
Man, you are lucky.
Boxing. Yeah. Moorer was a good boxer. And I thought he was in control of that fight. I remember I was sitting next to an LA area columnist who was saying, just sort of whining the entire fight. This fight is a travesty. This should never have happened. Foreman shouldn't be in the ring with this guy, blah, blah, blah. And then bam, Moorer might have gotten a little lazy for a moment, and Foreman slipped that right through his guard, putting him flat on his back to become the oldest to win the heavyweight championship at 45 years old. To this day, I have not heard a louder sound than I heard at that moment.
Wow.
That's how deafening the crowd was at that moment. I could have yelled at the top of my lungs and I couldn't have heard myself. That's how loud it was. I still get chills when I think about that fight. Then you think about the kind of person Foreman is and how much that meant to him, and the way he dropped to his knees and prayed after he got that victory. That's just it's an all-time wonderful moment in boxing history.
Yeah, it certainly was, and credit to HBO. I don't know if you remember the Legendary Night series, but the one for Foreman Moorer was just exquisite. I remember watching that and listening to Foreman break down how he set up that shot and how, he threw this body shot here to move Moorer over here. And he said he landed the first right hand, and he said, I was stunned that he didn't go down. And then like moments later, he landed a second one that knocked him out. And then hearing Moorer basically say like, well, the first right hand pretty much knocked him out on his feet. And but he stayed up, and then, the next one dropped him. If you guys haven't seen that, you should definitely check it out. You should check out all the fights on this list if you want, to watch guys, great fighters, with great ring IQs who are able to pull it together at least one more time in their advanced age. And in our advanced age, we are going to wrap up this week's show. We want to thank, of course, Freddie Roach for joining us, Darwin Price as well, and of course to you guys for listening. Be sure to check back next week for more boxing talk, more interviews right here on the PBC podcast.